let me just get myself oriented and get the screen sharing going for, let's see who can share. All right. Can share. Okay, how do I do this? Share. And I might need some help in terms of sharing.
Yes, could you share your screen? And then
yeah, I'm sharing, but I'm trying to share. Let's see, stop others. Do you want? Okay, all right, I got it. Yep. All right, do you guys see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. My name is Liang. I am the head of customer partnership solutions for Asia at Swiss Re. So the folks at Intellect asked me to actually come and speak about digitalization of mental health care. And as I was putting this this presentation together, you know, as I thought more about it, I thought, you know what, actually what's really exciting about this topic is not so much the actual digitalization of it, but how it democratizes access to mental health care. So today I wanted to share with everyone, you know, how we look at the space, and also what Swiss Re is doing as a result of the digitalization of healthcare, you know, and what consumers can actually look forward to in terms of, you know, what some companies are actually doing in this space. All right, but let's go ahead and get started. And so for those of you who may not have heard about Swiss Re, let me just share a little bit of a background with everyone. So we are an insurance company for insurance companies. Okay, so a little bit of a strange thing for those of you who are not in the insurance industry. But what it essentially means is when insurance companies such as Aviva, Allianz, the brand names that you typically hear about need to pay out a claim, we actually work behind the scenes to jointly pay out the claims. Okay, and insurance companies come to us to do this so they can actually not have to bear the full load of, you know, claims that that need to be paid out. And what this allows them to do then is to actually sell more policies, while we on the back end help them out with paying out those claims concurrently. Okay, so so that's what we do. We work very closely with insurance companies, and a lot of you know, ideas, new concepts around insurance products actually, you know, oftentimes actually come from discussions between the Avivas, the FWDs, the Allianzes, etc., with companies such as ourselves, you know, on the reinsurance end. We've been here in Asia for more than 100 years now. So we are, you know, we have a long-standing commitment to the region. You know, as of last year, we protect 156 million lives all across Asia. And in the midst of COVID, by the end of 2020, just in that year alone, last year we paid out $5.5 billion in claims to consumers and to insurance companies so that they can pay, you know, their customers, you know, for 2020. Okay, we have 3 reinsurance business segments. You know, so core and transactions typically is, you know, is to basically work on, you know, contracts that of what I described earlier, which is to basically co-own the claims payment, you know, with insurance companies. The third one is a little bit different. So solutions. This segment essentially is, you know, what I would describe as the people who are part of the innovation sector. Okay, and these are the people who come up with the ideas for the next generation of insurance products, insurance solutions, you know, and so forth, that people, you know, consumers will typically see in the marketplace. So my team and I are actually part of the solutions team. We focus on 3 particular areas. You know, the first one is around growth, and we spend a tremendous amount of our time actually around digital distribution. You know, so a typical, an example of that would be, let's say, Alipay in China. Okay, and the reason we want to do this is because we know that there are a lot of young people who are actually using increasingly more and more of the digital platforms, and so this is a way for us to actually reach people. In terms of customer experience, a lot of people will actually say, what are insurance companies doing around customer experience? That sounds like more of a digital company, what a digital company would do. And the reality is we actually spend a lot of time in this space, trying to figure out how do we actually make the entire insurance process a lot easier, by using data, by using behavioral economics. How do we actually, give you less paperwork to fill out, at the end of the day when you apply for insurance. And last but not least, we focus on performance for our insurance clients, and so we get asked a lot about, how can we get more insurance to people? How do we find people who actually really need insurance? And what are the types of products they actually are interested in? And so we actually offer data analytics solutions to insurers to help them identify, and answer some of these questions. So hopefully that gives you a sense, of what we focus on. There's, I try not to use too much of the insurance lingo, and simply because the things that we focus on are very much, in line with a lot of what the digital world is actually going through today. We focus a lot, our innovations are very much grounded on consumer trends. So I won't go through these details, that are on this page, but this just gives you a sense of some of the things that we pay attention to when we actually develop new solutions and new products, okay? And so every step along the way, when we actually develop innovation, new innovations to push out to the market, they are very much guided by what's important to Asian consumers here in this part of the world. We also know that, there's a lot of exciting things happening in the digital world, and we cannot do it alone. As much as we actually have a profound knowledge of, risk management and so forth, we also know that there's a lot that we don't understand. And so we actively work with insurtechs, fintechs, medtechs, and we partner with them to basically ideate and actually do research and so forth, and take and build these products and collectively take them to market for insurers and for consumers. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a really good sense, of what is actually happening, of who Swiss Re is, and the focus that, my team and I actually spend our time on. It's very much grounded around digitalization. We spend a lot of time speaking with fintechs, insurtechs, medtechs, data analytics companies to actually understand how we can infuse a lot more digital aspects, of the world, particularly from a consumer perspective, into insurance. Okay, so let's segue into mental health care going digital. And perhaps I think the best place to start is to set some context of why we are at Swiss Re so interested and so excited about this. Earlier this year, we actually ran a survey, in the midst of obviously COVID-19, and what we found across 12 markets in Asia is that 2/3 of consumers are far, far more concerned about their overall health, as a result. And this is not necessarily just because of COVID-19. So it's not that they're concerned about COVID-19, but they are generally much, much more concerned, about their overall health. And so, and in some markets, it went as high. So 2/3 is the average around across Asia. But in some markets, the concern, went as high as 90%, okay, 80 to 90% of the consumers that we surveyed. So clearly there's a very intense spike, in this area, as a result of COVID-19. Now, we wanted to know a little bit more. And so we actually went back to these consumers and we said, look, here at Swiss Re, we know we have something that we call the Big 6 lifestyle factors. And these essentially are, research proven, clinically proven, factors that have been identified as key drivers of health risks and outcomes. Okay, so these 6 of them, some can be controlled on an individual level, okay? Some cannot. So for example, environment, you know, that speaks to essentially air pollution, water pollution, you know, and so that's not something that, you know, that an individual can control. But for the most part, you know, the remaining 5, you are somewhat in control, right? With the assumption that you have the ability to, you know, to go to a park to do physical activity, that, you know, with mental well-being, you can go and see, you know, a counselor, or that, you know, for nutrition, you are able to actually access, you know, healthy foods and so forth. Okay, so we asked consumers, you know, okay, 2/3 across Asia are really concerned, you know, about their overall health in the midst of, you know, in the midst of COVID. What are the things that actually, what are your biggest concerns? And what came back, you know, was that their number 1 biggest concern across the 12 markets was mental well-being. Okay, followed very closely by sleep, and followed by environment. And certainly when we dove into the numbers a little bit more, we took a look and we said, okay, what we're finding also is that, you know, the markets that actually spike a little bit higher, you know, are in 2 areas. The first are, you know, markets that are highly concerned are places where they've gone, you know, obviously into lockdown, but also where they actually don't have readily available access to specialists. Okay, and then the second piece, you know, are places such as Australia and New Zealand, where there is already a heightened sense of awareness and understanding and appreciation of the importance of mental well-being. Okay, so with that, we actually said to ourselves, we said, okay, so mental well-being, this is the place that, you know, that we clearly need to be addressing. We probably need to be addressing this for, you know, for years down the road, because, you know, these are pretty long, these can in some cases be long-term ramifications. And so what we then did was we said, okay, let's go back and find out, you know, what are those barriers which actually prevent people from seeking mental health care across Asia? And so what you see in front of you are essentially, you know, the 6, you know, key drivers that people have come back and responded to us. You know, and the way I look at it is it actually can be broken down into 3 parts. The first part essentially is infrastructure. Okay, and infrastructure and the lack of, you know, available resources, etc., will have an effect on cost of treatment and the availability of resources. And the availability of resources will go to an extent whereby, because there's a lack of resources, there's not as much understanding of mental health care, you know, across the general population. And so sometimes, even if resources are available, because this is not a topic that's, you know, historically spoken about as much, people actually don't even know where and how to look for help, okay, in addressing, you know, their mental well-being. So that's the first one. The second, you know, the second one would be the next, you know, 3 bullets. So stigma, you know, with friends and family, at the workplace, you know, very Asian aspect of not wanting to burden others, you know, and, you know, just, you know, feeling, hey, I can do this, I can manage this, you know, myself, you know, and this is what I would cluster as and explain as these are, you know, aspects of these are actually societal, you know, in nature. Some of them are very personal, but there is actually an influence around, they are influenced by societal expectations, cultures, you know, and values, you know, and so this is also, again, nothing new, because as a result of COVID, these have actually long been there. You know, and so again, what we said to ourselves at Swiss Re was, okay, you know, there's clearly a lot of work to be done. How do we simplify, right, giving people access, right? And third, last but not least, loss of income. You know, I think this one speaks for itself. If you're not feeling great, you know, either you have a cold, you have COVID, or if you're just not feeling great, you know, mentally that day, and if you can't go to the office, you know, certainly there is loss of income, right? And, you know, look, this is not really because of a single day event. This tends to be, you know, series of incidents where you may not be able to actually go to work for, you know, weeks or months at a time. Okay, but these are essentially what, you know, consumers shared with us. And so we kind of sat there and we said, wow, this is, you know, truly quite, it's quite heavy, right? It's quite heavy. It can be quite negative. Where do we actually start? But one of the things that we get very excited about, right, is that at the end of the day, when we look at some of the stats that are actually starting to appear, okay, in Asia, Asian consumers, I think, are just generally, because of our historical lack of access to, infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, and the fact that we have a fairly young population with very high mobile penetration, we're quite resilient, and we're very open to actually embracing new technology, and that is, playing out itself as we speak, and will continue to play itself out over the coming years. And so what we're seeing is that Asians are empowering themselves, right? As long as, innovation is actually provided, and it's actually provided in a reasonable cost, in a reasonable service quality and level, Asian consumers are very, very willing to embrace, new ways of, accessing digital health and wellness services. Okay, and so these numbers are actually really daunting, and they're very, very encouraging. Right, McKinsey came out with a report just a couple months ago, I think it was in July, where they took a look at all of the digital health platforms across, major markets across Asia, and took a look and realized that actually the number of, monthly active users on these digital health platforms is actually quite daunting. It's nearly 1.5 billion, right? So clearly there is traction that's going on. One of the things that we actually look at, fairly closely, that we take a very strong interest at Swiss Re, is also on connected wearable devices. So when you think about connected wearable devices, these are essentially what you wear, Apple Watches, Fitbits, Garmin's, Xiaomi's, and so forth. And, and these devices are being worn to track, right, for you to know, how many steps you've taken, how many hours you've slept, what kind of quality of sleep you had, as well as perhaps, what is your resting heart rate after you go for a run? What is your resting heart rate after watching 6 hours of, nonstop Netflix? But what it all shows is that Asians are basically embracing, they are taking ownership. They're starting to take ownership and be very open to actually addressing, gaps in, healthcare services, in the healthcare service infrastructure, and being creative about how to take care of themselves. Okay, so yeah, it's certainly an area that we at Swiss Re take a look and monitor very, very closely. Okay. I'm actually going to, okay, keep going, next page. So when we take a look at, digitalization of mental health care, in terms of how, it democratizes access to care for consumers, 4 things come to mind. Okay, of why it actually democratizes access to care. And it actually is a democratization of care, not just to people who previously couldn't afford or could not have, simply had no access, but it actually democratizes and simplifies access to care for people who also previously had the means to do so. And so I'll explain that in a little bit more. I think affordability is probably one of the areas where, that is easiest to explain, right? So if you live in Singapore, if you need to go see a counselor, I think the last I heard, per session, we're talking about, anywhere from $100 to $250 Singapore dollars. Not everybody can afford that, right? But certainly with, mental health care apps, etc., the cost actually drops considerably. And I think this is actually one of the hygiene factors that is actually needed, to get more people to understand and be willing to embrace mental health care apps. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is accessibility. And I think there's a lot more to accessibility than simply saying, hey, because this is, because I have a mental health care app today, it now sits on my phone, I can switch it on anytime, 24/7, and I can speak to a specialist, or I can actually, go through a CBT, therapy session on my own, right? It's actually more than that. When you think about accessibility, What it also means is that in the past, you know, if you lived in a major city, you probably had access to way more specialists than somebody who lives in a second tier, third tier city, or perhaps even a town that only has, you know, 600,000, you know, population. Okay, and that's something that is actually quite prevalent across Asia, just simply because we don't, as a region, we generally don't have enough you know, healthcare professionals from GPs all the way to specialists. And so what happens is that, you know, GPs and specialists actually tend to congregate in large cities. And so if you're living, you know, in a village today or in a town today, what you know, mental health care apps such as Intellect and Wiser can do is you now no longer have to actually travel. Right? You have access to the same quality, to the same type of services that somebody in a major city has access to. Okay, and this is a really, really big game changer, right? So instead of then, you know, sending, you know, doctors out to multiple places, you have a centralization of doctors, and actually now, you know, patients come to you, and anybody who, as long as they have access to a phone, can download the app, will immediately have access, and it will be no different from somebody who lives, you know, in Jakarta, in Singapore, in Seoul, you know, and so forth. Okay, so that's the second one. The third piece that you know, that we feel is really, really important is, again, you know, from a privacy perspective, what we're observing, and you know, I've now spent, I think this is now my second year, you know, looking quite deeply into you know, health apps, is the power of privacy. Okay, and this is particularly important in mental health care, given the stigma that is out there, you know, on this particular topic. And so what happens now, and I've seen this not with Intellect, but with a different provider, you know, last year, is we're starting to see that because, you know, there is ease of access, and because it's sitting on a mobile phone, it is a lot easier for people to decide not only when they want to actually engage and seek mental health care services, but also where, okay, and what time. Okay, and that's really, really important in, you know, busy societies where, you know, I may not be able to actually have this conversation in my room because I have a roommate, but I can take it somewhere else, you know, perhaps to the living room, to the kitchen, you know, etc. I no longer actually need to walk into a clinic. You know, and on the empowerment side, you know, because you know, this actually, the app allows you to actually pick, right? You can decide when you want to, you know, when you want to actually access a service, who you want to access the services with, and how long you want to access the services for. Okay, and so this actually starts to take, you know, this starts to take away, you know, worries, concerns around, you know, whether or not I should be using this, can I use this, who's going to find out if I use this? Because if I am, you know, actually using, you know, the app in the kitchen, and somebody in my family walks in and I don't want them to know, very simple, just switch it off. Right. And so these are all, you know, pretty much game changers in terms of giving people just such easy access, you know, to services that are badly needed. The last point on here that gets us really exciting, and this is one that I find very, very interesting, you know, as I look at a lot of, you know, mental health care apps, and just healthcare apps in general, but particularly from mental health care apps, you know, the ones that actually gain, you know, good traction actually are very good at actually creating a familiar experience. Okay, they're very good at actually creating a UI and UX that that users are already familiar with. And this is incredibly important because in Asia, you know, we are very much, you know, digitally savvy, digitally led, and so people who are experienced and comfortable, purchasing groceries on e-commerce platforms like Lazada, etc., when they go into, an app where it is about a topic, a service that is actually very personal and very serious in some cases, having the ease of being able to work through the app, without much having to basically read through, instructions, and being met with, a design and, text that is, that is compassionate, that has a lot of empathy towards the user, only serves to actually attract more people, not only to use the app, but serves to attract people to actually come back. Okay, and so I actually spoke with one of the users, of Intellect. I was talking to a friend, over coffee a couple of weeks ago, and I said, there's a lot of these apps, etc., and I just happened to mention, Intellect, and the person actually said to me, he said, I really like using it. I like using it, because it's just really easy, and it doesn't make me feel like I'm going to the doctor. Okay, so they were clearly referring to actually the CBT part of the Intellect app, right? But it was actually quite interesting, because what it meant was that person actually told me, because it was so easy, because it was so it wasn't scary, they found themselves actually much more willing to go back over and over into the app to use it when they needed it, quite a bit. Okay, so just, in terms of then how this actually affects corporates, right? So the digitalization is, yes, first and foremost, consumers actually benefit the most, but on the corporate side, companies such as Swiss Re, and other insurance companies will stand to also, benefit, because what this does is, because pricing has actually come down, we are more likely to embrace this, because we can actually now figure out a way, to incorporate mental health services into our offerings. Okay. The second component of why digitalization is important, right, is then, we also then get to understand, looking at anonymized consumer, behavior on these apps, what people actually use the app for, when do they use it, how, what aspects of the app they use, and this actually then feeds into product innovation. Okay, and this is basically where, a lot of the thinking around how do we incorporate and destigmatize and democratize mental health care, so it becomes part of the norm, it becomes, a more openly discussed society. Well, one way to do that is to start incorporating it into other services and into other industries. Okay, so let me share a little bit about, so I think I've given you a little bit of, hey, why we're excited. Let me share with you a little bit of, I guess, a sneak peek of what we're doing, around mental well-being at Swiss Re. So we've been been in the mental health, space from an insurance perspective for quite some time. We, invest in research, we partner with, institutions around the world to understand, what kind of studies they are doing. And we take a lot of that research and actually build that into insurance products and solutions that we offer. Currently in Asia, you won't see a Swiss Re branded mental health insurance, or an insurance that actually has a component of mental health. But what you will see is that we support, we actually support insurers who offer this across Asia. And today, I think based on my last count, we are in 6 markets. Okay. But the challenge is that, we continue to actually have customers go to insurance companies, who then in turn come back to us and say, but we need to do more. There surely is more that we can do. Okay, and we do agree. Okay, we do think that, we very, very much believe we can do more, to help consumers, because we know that consumers come to the insurance industry to actually get financial protection. But what we also know is, ultimately, at the end of the day, beyond the financial protection, what they really want, what consumers really, really want, is to live longer and healthier lives. Okay, and so the challenge for the insurance industry is, okay, paying out, the claim, isn't as big of a challenge. But more importantly, how do we help customers live longer and healthier lives? And so that's actually a lot of the work that the team and I here in Asia, as well as in other parts of, in Europe, in North America, we are looking into what can we do. And so one of the things that, some of you who, are familiar with some of the insurance products will know that is that insurance companies have started to actually incentivize consumers to actually increase their physical activity. Okay, we've been incentivizing, customers to also, tell us how well you slept. We can incentivize you. Obviously, we'll teach you how to make sure, we'll teach you ways to make sure you get a good night's sleep. But tell us how you do, because when you do better, we know you're healthier. When you're healthier, you're less likely to get sick, and when you're less likely to get sick, we also then stay away from having to see you in a hospital or see you with a specialist, and then having to, having to pay a huge, medical bill, right? So this is essentially what we've been trying to do. And we try to tackle as much as we can each of these factors that I shared, that I introduced earlier. But the reality is, and I think Dr. Oliver yesterday, I was listening to what he spoke about, and he shared the same chart because, and brought a smile to my face, because this is a chart that actually was published by Swiss Re Institute. But the reality is, these lifestyle factors are actually not independent of each other. Okay, and so one of the things that we fully recognize at Swiss Re is that mental well-being is highly interconnected to all the other 5 factors. Yeah, and so the question for us then, has always, on an ongoing basis, is, what can we do, okay, to start to interlink and get consumers to actually have a stronger sense of mental well-being, okay, by getting them to do physical activities, by getting them to sleep better, and in turn, when they are mentally, when their mental well-being is in a very, very good state, we can then get them to sleep better, etc. It's all interlinked, and there are strong relationships, right? And so if we can lift all of these components, or as many of these components as possible, we can then help our customers get to a longer and healthier life. Okay, so this is the mindset. This is the thought process. This is kind of the foundation of what we believe, and why we are very keen to work with companies, who are, very vested in the digitalization of mental health care. And so, I'll leave you with this page, right, which is, the way we look at it today. And, we think that we are best placed in Asia for the reason I mentioned earlier, which is Asians are probably some of the most digitally savvy consumers in the world, right? And what we do is we actually, are starting to integrate and really, tap into the use of, digital services, digital devices, to actually help measure and to encourage, better lifestyle activities. Okay, so previously, okay, for the last 2-3 years, what we really could do as an industry was really focus, really rely upon mobile phones and wearable devices to actually track physical activity and sleep. But, we believe in all 6, right? And we know that mental well-being is a huge aspect of your overall health. And so one of the things that we're starting to do, and we're conducting research, on this, is how do we then start to include digital mental health care, offer the service, right, by way of an app, and start to actually, through the app, encourage and get customers to actually go in, conduct their own, pull out the CBT therapy that, folks like Intellect actually offer when they actually need that help, right? And how do we, in that process, also, when people are actually feeling down, we detect that and we say, hey, go out for a walk. Go out for a walk, because when you go out for a walk, you'll come back and you'll feel better. When you feel better, you'll go home at night, you'll sleep better. And when you wake up tomorrow, you will feel better. Okay, because all of these three then will actually end up with a health outcome that at Swiss Re we call personal resilience. Okay, so this is the work that we're doing. We're incredibly excited about this space. You know, my team and I feel very, you know, pretty energized every day when we work on this particular topic. And hopefully this was helpful, you know, in sharing with you why, at least from a Swiss Re perspective, you know, why everybody should care, right, and should try, you know, these sorts of services, you know, including, of course, intellect. All right. So my name is Lauren Liang. If you'd like to, you know, connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn, you know, and I'd be happy. I think I have probably a few minutes left, you know, to answer any questions.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks so much for a very informative session, and thanks for sharing the Swiss Re's perspective on how we can bring together different stakeholders, and through digitalization, we can help people to live longer and healthier lives. I think we have some time for you to answer some questions. If you can click on the Q&A box, you can see some questions. Feel free to choose the ones that you feel are relevant.
Yeah, you know, how much time do I have, Anna? I know I'm...
We have about 3 to 4 minutes left.
3 to 4 minutes. All right. I'll just go down. Let me take a look. I'll go down the list. Okay. So when you say, yeah. So I think there was a question. Wouldn't you say insurers can also help encourage people to look after their own? So the question is, I'm just going to read this out. Can people see this, Anna? Can they see the questions or no?
Yes, they can see the question.
Okay, so I'm just going to answer the first question, right? Wouldn't you say insurers, you know, can help encourage people to look after? You know, the answer is yes. You know, the insurance companies actually today do offer these services. I believe the digital services are just beginning to be offered, and I know that Intellect, you know, is pretty active in this particular space. But you're absolutely right in the sense that, you know, historically, when we think about mental health, you know, a lot of the discussion is around conditions such as schizophrenia, you know, etc. But really, what the survey that I shared earlier, you know, what people are actually looking for, the mass majority there is, and because this afflicts actually more people, right? People are actually looking for help around depression, around anxiety, you know, and so this is the area that we're trying to do. And so when you think about what I shared earlier around getting people to actually go out for physical activity, etc., it is intended to actually be that first layer of defense. Right? So we don't want you to get to the point where it becomes something really serious and you need to start to take medication. You know, we want you to catch it early. We want to give you the tools, you know, for you to self-administer. And if self-administration doesn't help, we want to give you an app that actually allows you to, you know, to quickly book, you know, a session with a counselor or with a clinical psychiatrist. Okay, so so yes, that's something we are looking into, and we're looking to build into insurance products. Oh, let's see. The next question is Singapore digital space oversaturation. Okay, there's a lot of social media. Yeah, is it a good idea to have all-in-one service? I think the Singapore government's actually done quite a bit. You know, I think the opening yesterday, I listened to the opening, you know, by I think one of our MPs, I think here in Singapore. I think the Singapore government is actually trying to consolidate. So yes, I think it always is. I think particularly in this area, in this space, because it's just not a topic that's spoken enough of. And so, you know, for me, I think the long-term, you know, solution is not just digitalization, but then it is just more and more discussion and awareness from stakeholders across, you know, across various industries, including, you know, from the government. Okay, let me just go down. Let's see. I'll answer one last question because I'm very keenly aware. I'm just going to pick one. Let's see. What apps are there for digital mental health? Okay, I'm going to answer this because, I think the first one, certainly there's intellect, there is, the Singapore government actually has done quite a bit. I know that intellect is working closely, with the institutions here. I know that there's a peer or a competitor, of intellect, called WISA. We have seen a tremendous increase in the number of mental health apps in the industry. So I think there's probably around 600 today. If you go into Google Play Store and go into the Apple Store and just type mental health, you'll see all of the options available. Okay, and so I think it just comes down to which one you're familiar, which one you're most comfortable with. In terms of using. So for me personally, I downloaded about 3 or 4 that I thought looked interesting and just basically tried them and said, okay, and then decided to actually stick with 1 or 2. Okay, so that would be that would be my suggestion in terms of what are the apps that are available. There's a lot. There's 600 plus, overall. So with that, Anna, I guess I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Next, we have a pre-recorded session with Annette Lee and Benjamin Keck, which is moderated by Theodoric, the CEO and co-founder of Intellect, and they will be discussing why it's important to take care of your mental health. So stay tuned. We'll be playing the recording shortly.